Hello, everyone. I'm François Picard. How to keep it together in Syria. That's the objective of a conference attended by its new foreign minister, a conference hosted by France as Paris calls for the easing of sanctions that have been in place for decades, for more than a decade. This after the December fall of the regime of Bashar al-Assad. For more, let's cross now to France 24's James Andre at the conclusion of that summit. James, you're just back recently from Syria, where you've witnessed a nation that's right now at peace, trying to keep it together, and that is in desperate need of international aid after the pullout of pro-Iran militias as well. James, your thoughts on how this conference meshes with the reality on the ground?
Well, look, Emmanuel Macron's just spoken here at the conference minutes ago, and in fact, he gave his broad view as to what needed to be done. Now, what we could say is that it appears that this conference has borne fruit in a sense because indeed the president spoke pretty early, in fact, and I'd say one of the main informations is that he confirmed that indeed he will invite Ahmed al-Shara to visit France and the French presidency in weeks, maybe months to come, but quite rapidly. He also said that France was in favor of rapid lifting of the sanctions. Basically, the president outlined four main goals. The first one is security, saying that indeed France and its partners consider that Daesh is very much, that the Islamic State group is very much still a risk in eastern Syria, a risk that needs to be kept under control. France also reaffirming its support to the Syrian Democratic Forces. Those are the Kurdish-led forces that help the international coalition on the ground beat the Islamic State group and is now guarding its prisoners and all these areas that were liberated from the so-called caliphate at this stage. Also calling for a reinforcement of the international coalition against terrorism that indeed fought the organization. So that's one of the four items. The second one is governance, saying that he wants an inclusive governance for the whole of Syria, for all Syrians. Then the humanitarian situation, he says, needs to be tackled. France, who will be indeed spending 50 million euros on helping Syria, saying that indeed the French Development Agency will be working on the ground soon with the government in order to decide what priorities need to be addressed first. And fourthly, it is the justice problem, the fact that you need to put in place a transitional justice in order to keep the country together, as you were saying, to keep it calm and indeed to make sure that those who've committed crimes under Bashar al-Assad's rule are indeed punished. And that means, obviously, taking care of the evidence and indeed putting this mechanism in place. Now, you were saying I had been to the country, and that is true. I came back probably about 10 days ago. And what I can tell you is that lifting the sanctions is absolutely crucial in order for Syria to stabilize. I mean, we ourselves with Ashraf Abid, my colleague, we went on patrol with policemen who were not being paid, tackling the issue of people who were basically taking arms and just trying to take control of their neighbor's hangar or garage or flat, arguing that indeed these buildings belong to former Bashar al-Assad army generals, for example. We also saw that indeed the difficult task of unifying a new Syrian army is at hand, and all this needs money, of course. And then there is everything to do with the general public, like power outages. There are only about 2 to 3 hours of power a day in Damascus. This is a problem that needs to be solved. And you could talk about a lot of other sectors, transport, medicine. There are a lot of problems to be solved, and all these need international cooperation and money, and it does appear that a step has been taken today.
And Emmanuel Macron, as you mentioned, expressing support for the Kurdish-led SDF militias, which in the northeast of the country have taken on ISIS. Does that put him on a collision course among those attending? Turkey's deputy foreign minister, Turkey, which is squarely against the SDF.
Yes, absolutely. This is probably the thorniest issue in Syria right now when it comes to unifying the country and indeed to pacifying it and to disarm all militias and armed groups. Obviously, the Syrian Democratic Forces are a very powerful group that is backed by the United States of America, though it is unclear what Donald Trump's posture is when it comes to Syria. But what we do know is that indeed some sort of agreement needs to be reached when it comes to the Syrian Democratic Forces. And the big question mark, of course, is Turkey. For Turkey, it is absolutely acceptable that the YPG militia, that is the backbone of the Syrian Democratic Forces, obtains some sort of territorial or military control just the other side of the border in northeastern Syria. On the other hand, very clearly the new transitional government in Syria is calling upon the Kurds, saying, look, join the army, join us, and let's work together. The Kurds themselves are actually right now fighting with some Turkish-backed militia in the northern central part of the country. So this is a very, very tense issue and complex one. And now France has made it very clear where it stands. It says we will not let our allies down.
James Andre, many thanks for that live update. For more, let's go to Washington, D.C. She's a French diplomat, Souhire Medini, visiting fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Thank you for being with us here on France 24. Before we talk about the main issue, I guess you could call it, which is how to lift those sanctions, first of all, your reaction to what we just heard there with the French president squarely expressing his support for the SDF and for these Kurdish-led militias. That has been up to now the policy of the United States. The U.S., which, by the way, sent a low-level delegation to this conference. Is it going to be the policy of the Trump administration?
So far, it's really hard to answer this question because at this stage, it seems like there is no clear and definitive US strategy. As you talked before, Syria is not the only priority now for the new administration. Ukraine is on the top list. Many talks about the tariffs. So this explains also why so far there is no clear US strategy, and maybe one of the explanation of the representation the US presence now at this conference. And what we see now from the new American administration is that it initiated the most far-reaching of the whole of US foreign assistance in decades, which has huge consequences in Syria. And on the military side, once again floated the idea of removing US troops from Syria, with on this particular topic some mixed messages coming with the Defense Department reportedly had made plans for possible withdrawals. But at the same time, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, recently saying that there is an opportunity in Syria and that the United States would, in a way, have to pursue, in a way, that opportunity, which may imply keeping these troops so far so that a withdrawal would be in US will be done eventually, but in a way that it protects US interests. Because what many allies now are worried of when it comes to a US withdrawal from Syria without proper planning and caution is that to have a withdrawal and a withdrawal would have Afghanistan-like consequences. This is one of the biggest worry from many allies, and probably the US administration will also take this point into consideration when they will decide in the coming period what they will do.
Because the fall of Bashar al-Assad signaling what some have seen as a generational shift in the region, what with Assad close to Iran, close to Russia, hence the race, if you will, to ease the sanctions as the French are calling for. Now, you have co-authored a paper in which you have said that lifting US and EU sanctions without coordination and without concrete benchmarks would be a mistake. What does that mean, concrete benchmarks?
The general idea is to answer two quick questions. Should Western countries and their Arab allies trust the new authorities completely without asking for proof of their good faith? The answer would be obviously not. But at the same time, should they respond to the new de facto leader's request for assistance? And here, the question is obviously yes. So the challenge, I would say, in the period ahead is to walk a thin line between these two main goals, meeting the needs of Syrians. As your correspondent just said, the reality on the ground needs support and assistance, but at the same time, without giving the new authorities what would be a blank check.
So, Souhire Medini, give us a concrete example of sanctions that can be lifted right now.
Concrete examples would be to have decisions on electricity infrastructures that would give the population in Syria a sense of concrete support. And when it comes to benchmarks, what could be benchmark is proof of an inclusive political process, to have appropriate counterterrorism actions from the new authorities against the Islamic State, but also against Al-Qaeda and affiliates. We could have also a commitment to the destruction of the chemicals weapon programs. The cooperation began with the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, but it's the very beginning. And new steps, new commitments could give what I talked about, proof, what could be proof of good faith from these new Syrian authorities.
Ahmed al-Shara, he has got a wide-ranging alliance for now. He's also got cabinet members who are accused of war crimes for past deeds. So it's again that question of how much do you put under scrutiny this new team here when you compare it with the previous one?
Exactly. And that's why maybe there is many talks about transitional justice, at how it should not be the cherry on the cake, but a vital part of what's going on, of the whole conversation, and also of the reconstruction process in Syria.
I want to thank you so much for being with us from Washington, Souhire Medini.
Thank you very much.